Something fundamental shifted this week that most people have not fully processed yet. Iran launched a new class of weapons, and the footage emerging from the region makes it nearly impossible for anyone to maintain the standard narrative. This is no longer a regional skirmish, it is a structural breakdown, and the consequences will reach far beyond the Middle East. To understand what is happening right now, you must look at the architecture of the situation. For decades, the American military presence in the Middle East operated on a simple premise: forward bases, strategic partnerships, and deterrence through presence. The idea was that merely being there with carriers, air assets, and regional alliances would keep adversaries in check. Iran, however, never fully accepted this framework. Since the Islamic Revolution of 1979, Tehran has been methodically building an asymmetric military doctrine. This strategy was not designed to match American firepower head-on, as that would be suicidal. Instead, Iran invested in missiles, drones, proxy networks, and the patience to wait for the opportune moment. That moment appears to have arrived. The current conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran represents a scenario that analysts have been quietly warning about for years, a situation where America's conventional military advantages are being systematically neutralized by unconventional Iranian strategy. As of this week, the situation has escalated into territory that is genuinely difficult to retreat from. American and Israeli forces conducted strikes on Iranian territory, including reported attacks near Isfahan, a major city with significant civilian and strategic infrastructure. Iranian state sources reported at least 15 fatalities from those strikes. Iran did not respond in kind immediately. It calculated and then launched what it officially designated as the 55th wave of Operation True Promise 4, known as Wa'ad al-Sadiq. This was a structured, deliberate military campaign rather than a reactive, emotional strike. The weapons used were not improvised. Iranian military sources confirmed the deployment of Fatah hypersonic missiles, Imad ballistic missiles, Ghadr medium-range ballistic missiles, and a coordinated swarm of attack drones. Hypersonic projectiles travel at speeds that make conventional missile defense systems, including those developed by Israel and the US at the cost of billions, extremely difficult to engage successfully. The targets of this campaign included the Tel Nof Air Base, Ben Gurion International Airport, aerospace production and fueling infrastructure, and naval support operations in Bahrain, specifically the Jufair and Sheikh Issa air bases. Israel's own Channel 13 broadcast footage showing cluster warhead deployment over central Israel, depicting a single missile fragmenting midair and spreading explosive submunitions across multiple kilometers. Documented destruction at 10 separate sites was shown on Israeli domestic television. When a national broadcaster shows that scale of damage, it is no longer propaganda, it is confirmation. Simultaneously, Iran extended its operational reach into the Gulf states. Major strikes were reported against commercial and infrastructure targets in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. At Fujairah port in the UAE, one of the world's busiest bunkering hubs, fires were recorded following a drone attack on the oil industry zone. Footage circulating on social media showed significant structural damage. This is the consequence phase, and it is still unfolding. Iran has essentially communicated a message to Gulf states that have hosted American bases and participated in regional anti-Iran architecture. Your proximity to an American military presence does not protect you. It makes you a target. Washington is currently facing what strategists call a trilemma. 3 options, none of which are good. Option 1 is withdrawal, in which America pulls back and ceases operations against Iran. This might preserve American lives and end the immediate escalation, but the cost would be enormous. A withdrawal signals to every regional actor, including Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, and Jordan, that American security guarantees are conditional and reversible. Israel would lose its primary external patron in an active conflict, while China and Russia would immediately interpret this as a strategic retreat. Furthermore, the dollar's role as the global reserve currency, already under pressure from de-dollarization trends, would take another significant hit. Withdrawal might end the war, but it might also permanently end American primacy in the Middle East. Option 2 is escalation, which would mean boots on the ground. A full conventional military campaign against Iran would not be like Afghanistan. It would be significantly harder. Iran has a population of approximately 90 million people, and the terrain is rugged, mountainous, and strategically complex. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, has spent 4 decades preparing specifically for this scenario. They have distributed military infrastructure, underground facilities, and a deeply motivated fighting force. The cost in American lives, resources, and global reputation would be staggering. The Afghanistan campaign lasted 20 years, cost over $2 trillion, and ended without a decisive American victory. Iran presents an even harder operational environment by most measures. Option 3 is nuclear coercion. Some voices in the hawkish wing of American policy have floated the idea of tactical nuclear deployment as a last resort. arguing that conventional strikes are not producing sufficient deterrence. However, this option carries consequences that dwarf the others. America's NATO allies would fracture immediately, and the global nonproliferation framework, already fragile, would collapse. China and Russia would have immediate justification to accelerate their own nuclear postures, and the moral authority that underpins American soft power globally would be gone permanently. There is no version of option 3 that does not create 10 new crises. This leads to a situation that has received insufficient attention in mainstream coverage. President Trump issued what amounted to a public ultimatum to NATO allies, demanding that member nations contribute naval assets to ensure the Strait of Hormuz remains navigable. The response from NATO allies was essentially a refusal. Britain declined to send warships, and other NATO members followed suit. This is significant because the Strait of Hormuz is one of the most strategically critical waterways on the planet, with approximately 20% of the world's oil passing through it. If Iran can credibly threaten that choke point, it affects global energy markets, supply chains, and every economy connected to petroleum-based trade. Yet, NATO allies are declining to act. This suggests that after years of burden-sharing disputes and the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, allies have made a calculation. They believe the strategic cost of entering this conflict outweighs the benefit of maintaining unconditional solidarity with Washington. This represents a seismic shift in geopolitical alignment. Meanwhile, the scheduled meeting between President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping, reportedly planned for the end of March, has been flagged as potentially delayed. Trump's framing was explicit. If China does not help stabilize the situation at Hormuz and protect those with strategic interests there, the summit may not proceed. This reveals that America is now in the position of asking China, its primary strategic competitor, for assistance in managing a conflict in the Middle East. That is not the posture of a nation operating from a position of strength. It is the posture of a nation that has exhausted its coalition-building options and is reaching across the table to an adversary for help. China has every incentive to let this situation continue without intervening, as a prolonged American entanglement in the Middle East diverts strategic attention and resources away from the Indo-Pacific, where China's core interests lie. Perhaps the most strategically important development this week came not from a battlefield, but from a press statement. General Ali Mohammed, spokesperson for the IRGC, made a calculated disclosure. The missiles Iran has been using in recent strikes were developed approximately 10 years ago. This means Iran is not using its newest weapons. What you are seeing in the footage, the destruction at multiple sites, the hypersonic delivery systems, and the cluster warheads, is a decade-old Iranian arsenal. The message to Washington, Tel Aviv, and every NATO capital is unmistakable. You haven't seen what we have built recently. This is classic deterrent signaling. Iran is not revealing its full capability. It is revealing just enough to force a recalculation. Behind every geopolitical analysis are human consequences that do not always make it into strategic briefings. For those watching the situation unfold from abroad, the Strait of Hormuz is not just a distant geography lesson. If Iranian operations significantly disrupt traffic through that choke point, global oil prices will spike. Energy sectors and consumer prices for fuel, transportation, and goods affected by supply chain costs will all feel the downstream pressure. Global trade systems run on energy, and what happens in the Persian Gulf does not stay there. There are 15 people confirmed killed in Isfahan. Residential areas near missile impact sites across Israel are in ruins, and fires are burning at a major port in the UAE. These are human beings, families, and communities caught inside a conflict driven by calculations made in capitals thousands of kilometers away. The pattern of this conflict is that the people who make the decisions are rarely the ones who absorb the consequences. Israel finds itself in a genuinely precarious situation. It is fighting on multiple fronts, managing Iranian missile campaigns, Hezbollah pressure from the north, and the complex politics of maintaining American support. While that support becomes increasingly contested domestically within the United States, the Israeli public is now watching their own national broadcasters document destruction in real time. The psychological pressure of sustained missile attacks, even when defense systems intercept the majority, is a strategic instrument in itself. Iran understands this. The targeting of Ben Gurion Airport, the center of Israeli civilian life and international connectivity, is designed to communicate reach and consequence. As of this week, Iran is escalating rather than retreating. Its military is deploying advanced long-range systems and signaling that it has held its most capable weapons in reserve. It is extending its strikes beyond Israel into the Gulf states, reframing the entire regional dynamic. America is facing a coalition problem. Its NATO allies are declining to contribute, and its relationship with China is being used as leverage. The Gulf states are recalibrating as the presence of American bases is increasingly viewed as a potential liability. The Strait of Hormuz sits at the center of a standoff with no clear resolution. We are witnessing a realignment of Middle Eastern power under structural pressure from multiple directions simultaneously. question is not whether the order changes, but what replaces it and who shapes that replacement. This story will define the next decade of global geopolitics. If America's three options, withdrawal, escalation, or nuclear coercion, all carry major costs, what is Washington's realistic next move? Is there a fourth option that no one is discussing? As the Gulf states watch American military guarantees be tested in real time, it is worth considering if countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE will begin quietly distancing themselves from the American security umbrella. If they do, the implications for the region will be profound. This conversation matters as we look toward the future of global stability. Thank you for staying informed on these critical developments.